we can say hello. We say hello. Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
What's that?
Well, I thought I'd do a talk online. Do you want to help?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I'm Pádraig, and this is Carlotta.
And that's Liam.
And Liam is...
Liam.
And Liam is there. And I'm a writer, I'm a journalist, I teach a little bit, and also I am reading James Joyce these days in a bit of a plague year. So, Molly's last words, and yes, I said, yes I will, yes, are sitting here on my desk in this room, which is newly my study, where once our Airbnb lodgers slept. Out my window, my wife, a fellow Dubliner whose day job is with the NHS, has been minding our baby son and digging up our garden from quarantine frustration. When we read, me here in this room now, texts hold answers, but you and I pose the questions. For Asa Nafisi, she secretly taught 7 girls literature in her house in 1990s Tehran. Lolita is about the criminality of making someone else's life solely about you.
Hello, Daddy. I can see you.
Jane Austen becomes about women making choices. Gatsby, about how dreams, like revolutions, shatter often in reality. Henry James becomes about uncertainty, something totalitarian regimes and mindsets likewise hate.
Why are you speaking to the
And
bird?
reading Lolita or Pride and Prejudice in Tehran doesn't make those texts about life in Khomeini's Iran, but it shifts imperceptibly the angle between readers and the page, and whose nuance is lurking already there in the offset powder your eye can now spot. For the new critics of the 1930s and the 1940s, America, the text and its form
Speaking to the
and
phone.
their relationship are transcendent. But I think how we read today is a bit closer to how Gustave Lanson read in Paris a few decades before that, where readers peek occasionally over their shoulder at their society and do literary sociology at the same time as their explications of texts. Derrida spends 80 pages on the last word of Ulysses. Yes. Incidentally, imagine anything that would sell worse at W.H. Smith. But look at all the things yes can mean, he says. It can mean, I am here.
Let's go and pick Mommy up.
It can mean,
Let's go
like
pick
for Molly,
Mommy up.
like for many of us sequestered now with the newly bizarre habits of our partners, commitment and a willingness to say yes again. Why am I rereading Ulysses? For one, it is an incredibly funny text. We needn't follow down every single footnote. You have soap jumping out of Bloom's pocket and singing a show tune. You have the very rudest words in our language hidden in rhymes. If you're like your novels clever and simultaneously positively puerile, Ulysses is for you. You can imagine down the pub in Zurich, Joyce was insufferable. For another, I may not always like Stephen Dedalus, but there's something of him in me and maybe others. As an overly earnest and religious schoolboy learning for the first time how to read, I felt Portrait was about me. I stayed up all night bolting through its pages. I finished it in the morning with my cornflakes. Also, he takes us around the routines of daily life, routines we can't today do ourselves. We may say some goodbyes in coming months, maybe not always in the ways we want to. In the Hades episode in Neverland Cemetery, we go to a funeral. Poor Paddy Dignam stands in for James Joyce's friend Matthew Cain, who drowns in Dublin Bay just before Bloomsday on the 10th of July, 1904. It's observed by the first multicultural character in modern Irish literature. Jewish Leopold Bloom gets things wrong. He says a sudden death is the best death. No one answers because a sudden death means one without the sacraments. Growing up in Ireland, you go to a fair few funerals. Ireland has a very distinctive way of saying goodbye, with our culture of wakes, removals, services, more wake. Without doing all of this, it feels someone just disappears. When my auntie died last week and I was unable to attend her funeral, I described this by chat window to an English friend. She was quiet for a moment, then she asked, was I having her on? Bloom and his companion share a laugh in the carriage, then Cunningham says, we'd better look a little serious. Maybe you and I have been there. So I've argued Joyce is funny, silly, poignant. Yes, his labyrinths become more and more intricate. From the first short stories, like the ones in Dubliners, that you might leaf through on a long bus journey, on ultimately to the wake. But his outer structures are devastatingly simple, beautiful. He had only a children's version of the Odyssey beside him as he wrote, enough to give us episodes like Polyphemus, latter-day pub cyclops with his eye patch, able only to see one side of a fiendish political reality like our own. And the wake, it's one huge long loop. The sentence that begins with the words last words, away, alone, a last, a loved, along the, completes in the opening words, river run, past Stephen Adams, from swerve of shore to bend of bay. It's a circle, like the hydraulic cycle for the rivers that sit beside cities and their founders, Tiber, Rome, Liffey, Dublin. In a plague year, it offers transcendence, the biggest imaginable zoom out, and comfort. And have we ever had the fall of man rendered as phonetically as on page 1? Baba gaga karaka mina ron combron tona ron ton thona rona huna skoda to who de her nunk. Maybe Joyce is an odd person to read when homebound.
I finished.
Ulysses is a travel book. 16 June 1904 is the day There, second half. Maybe Joyce is an odd person to read when homebound. Ulysses is a travel book. 16 June 1904 is the day Stephen and Leopold wander through the city Joyce himself fled, with the only arms I allow myself to use, silence, exile, and cunning. They enact a modern odyssey, eventually finding each other briefly, and in Bella Cohen's brothel, as father seeking a son, meeting son seeking a father. In the world off-page, 16 June 1904 was the precise day the artist as a young man fell in love with rustic Galway girl Nora Barnacle, and he immortalised the day for her. This, in the world of breakfasts of grilled mutton kidneys, which gave to his palate a fine tang of faintly scented urine, which Bloom eats in the morning, or stately, plump Buck Mulligan's bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed, his yellow dressing gown ungirdled. Joyce is not quite Stephen. Buck Mulligan is not quite Oliver St. John Gogarty. The worlds of on-page language and off-page mutton kidneys don't correspond quite this neatly, but they come together in places. Daedalus is, after all, Joyce's early pen name as a Clongo student, and Joyce, the architect of the century's great labyrinthine text, is the real Daedalus, the artificer who creates the labyrinth for the Minotaur at Crete and shows his son, Icarus, to fly to escape it. We might be flying from exile, perhaps in October, maybe in time for Samhain. This is a quarter day, the ancestor of Halloween, when one agricultural cycle ends in harvest and the next starts. 2 years join, but imperfectly, and in the crevice in between, it is possible to pass between the world of humans and the world of fairies. Bloomsday is our Samhain, where the world of sausages and fleshy Bloom and cerebral Stephen come together, but imperfectly, and for a moment it's possible to pass between them and benefit from the reconciliation effected at Bella Cohen's between Stephen and his intellect, and Bloom and his corporeality, and Molly and her sensuality, a trinity even if Joyce went to UCD. In 2011, the famously prickly Joyce estate granted Kate Bush license to use Molly Bloom's sensuous, doubting, ultimately affirming soliloquy in her Flower of the Mountain, as she wanted to do back in 1989. Like Molly, Kate sings, "I put my arms around him, yes, and drew him down to me so he could feel my breasts all perfume, yes. And his heart was going like mad, and yes, I said, yes, I will, yes." When with James Joyce we are in exile from our own cities and towns and lives, is it possible for texts and books to yoke us back to them at our windows? Oh, yes. Yes, I think it is. Yes. Bye.
Is that finished?